What's up guys, Saf here on SuperSaf TV, and this is my iPhone 14 Pro Max review. After almost 2 months, I was there at the Apple event to get my early hands on and have had my SIM card in this shortly after since. There's a lot that I like about it, some things that I don't like, and some things that definitely can be improved. I'll leave some timestamps down below if there's a particular section that you're interested in. Let's get to it. This video is sponsored by Rhino Shield. Stay tuned to find out how you can get 20% off your new iPhone case. The first thing I want to talk about is the display. Now, let me just go ahead and say this. The iPhone 14 Pro Max has one of the, if not the best displays in the smartphone market right now. It's sharp, it's vibrant, it's smooth with its 120Hz refresh rate. ProMotion technology goes all the way down to just 1 Hz, and you really do experience this on the day-to-day. But one of my favorite things about the iPhone display is that it's super bright. It's the brightest smartphone display out on the market. Goes all the way up to 2000 nits, so if you are out on a sunny day and wearing sunglasses, you'll really appreciate that extra brightness. Now visually, the biggest changes of the iPhone are also here at the front. So we do have slightly smaller bezels, which you're probably not going to notice. The thing that you will notice is this dynamic island. And I have a lot of thoughts about this dynamic island after using it for a couple of months. So firstly, the design. The pill-shaped cutout in the middle, I think this really makes it unique to Apple. We've seen pill-shaped cutouts before on Huawei phones, and particularly the S10 Plus, but these have been on the left or the right. This, I believe, is one of the first devices which has it in the middle, so it really gives it that Apple vibe, which everybody's going to copy now. Now, what's really interesting about the design of the dynamic island is that it's actually physically 2 separate cutouts, kind of like an exclamation mark. Shout out to Marquez for initially noticing this. And then the middle part is covered in pixels with software. Now, what's quite surprising to me is why didn't Apple just keep those 2 separate cutouts, which would have made it even more unique, and then just cover it with software once you're interacting with it? Now, I have a theory about this. I may be wrong, but my theory is that Apple initially did intend to have 2 separate cutouts. Otherwise, what would be the point of going through all of that manufacturing hassle? But along the line, what must have happened is Apple must have realized how expensive it is to have 2 separate cutouts instead of just the one. And they would have been thinking, we're gonna have to roll this out on other iPhones, the cheaper iPhones, not the Pro models eventually. And when we do that, it's gonna cost us so much money. So instead, shall we just fill this gap with pixels, and then that way the iPhone 15 and the iPhone 15 Plus, with my prediction, will have 1 single cutout for the dynamic island. They're not gonna have 2 separate cutouts. That's my theory anyway, I may be wrong. Now regarding this dynamic island, how do I feel about the dynamic element of it, shall we say? Well, I really do like the animations when you're unlocking the device and Face ID pops up, when you put this on charge and you get the battery animation, when you're playing music and then that just kind of goes towards the top. I love just how well it's been integrated with the software. Now in terms of an element which I will physically interact with, I'll be honest with you, I've very rarely used this over the past couple of months. And the main reason for that is it is the topmost element in the UI. I'm not going to be reaching over all the time just to interact with it. I mean, even if you look at iOS over the years, everything's moved towards the bottom. When you're on the lock screen, your notifications are towards the bottom. Even on Safari, the URL has moved towards the bottom, rightly so. I know some people don't like it, but personally, I love having everything towards the bottom so it's easily reachable. With the dynamic island being so high up, I just don't use it as much. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're playing some music and you just want to expand that, yes, it's pretty cool, but in terms of daily usage, I just don't think it's practical to be interacting with it all the time with it so high up. Now, I don't really know what the solution to this is. Maybe if we have it with reachability, actually moving the dynamic island features below, I don't know. But in its current state, I personally don't feel that it's that useful as an interactive element that you're gonna keep touching. That may just be me, but that's what I've personally found. In terms of it being a visual element with animations and things like that, I think it's absolutely great. Right, now while we're on the display, let's talk about something which I've been ranting about for the past few years and wanting on an iPhone, and that is the always on display. We finally have this. However, it's not perfect. Now, the best way I can describe the iPhone always on display is just a dimmed version of the lock screen. And that's essentially what it is. Now, Apple being Apple, because they're so late to the game with always on displays, wanted to do something different, and I get that, and this is definitely very different. And I do like it, in particular for some of the widgets that I can have on here. So for instance, the widgets that I personally like to have are the weather as well as world time. So because I'm traveling so much, I'm usually between Dubai, the UK and the US. So I like to have the different time zones, especially when I'm away. I can see what time it is at home or what time it is in the US where a lot of my clients are based. But the problem with the always on display being just a dimmed version of the lock screen is that I actually find it quite distracting because it seems like the device is on. In my opinion, the point of an always on display is just to give you some information at a glance, which you can choose to action if you want to. So for instance, on my S22 Ultra, I'll have the time, the date, and I'll have icons for notifications that I've had from different apps. So I can choose to action them if I want to. With the iPhone, it's just a dimmed version, and also the notifications pop up as they do on the lock screen in the same way. So I don't really have a list of the notifications that I can choose to action or not, like I can do on other devices. I have to physically go in and see what notifications I have. In addition to that, there's been situations where I've gone to bed a little bit earlier than my normal sleep time, and then I notice that in the completely dark room, the always on display is actually giving off too much light, and then I have to kind of turn my iPhone around so it's not distracting. So I get that Apple wants to be different, but I would definitely like to see more controls over the always on display. With software updates, I'd like to have it completely blacked out with just information that I want available on there. The other thing that a lot of people have been talking about with the always on display is the impact on battery life. And the truth is, it does impact battery life. I'd say roughly between 5 to 10% over the day, which is expected, but I think for some people, they've really noticed it. Now, I have another theory about this. Again, I may be wrong, but with the iPhone 13 Pro Max, because the battery life was so good, I think Apple thought, hey, if we take 5 to 10% off that with the always on display, people are really not going to mind. The problem with that is when people are used to something and you take it away, they really do notice it. And I have definitely noticed the drop in battery life compared to my iPhone 13 Pro Max. I wouldn't say it's significant. I still get through the day absolutely fine because the iPhone 14 Pro Max has amazing battery life. It's just not as good as what I'm used to on the 13 Pro Max. Now, sure, you can just choose to switch off the always on display and get similar battery life to the 13 Pro Max. But I'd say overall, the iPhone 14 Pro Max does have really good battery life. And when it comes to charging, yes, we have 20 watts of charging, which is going to give you around 50% in 30 minutes. We've also got wireless charging, which is still only 7.5 watts using a standard Qi wireless charger. You will have to use the proprietary MagSafe charger for 15 watts. And although I do like the MagSafe charger, I mostly have Qi wireless chargers across the house, and I like to just drop this on there, and not having the fastest speeds on a regular wireless charger is a little bit annoying, I'm not gonna lie. But for me, what's even more annoying when I'm charging the iPhone is the fact that we still have the lightning connector. Now, don't get me wrong, when the lightning connector initially released, it was way better than micro USB. But in 2022, when the MacBook Pro as well as the iPad Pro, both of which I use regularly, have the USB-C connector, it's just very inconsistent and annoying. When I'm away, I like to just have the single cable for my Android devices, for my MacBook Pro, for my iPad Pro, but I have to specifically carry a lightning cable just for my iPhone, which is now definitely inferior. I mean, Apple pretty much admitted this themselves on the keynote for the iPad mini, saying how much faster the USB Type-C connector is compared to the previous generation, which they didn't say, but has the lightning connector. And I really think it's time that iPhones use USB-C, and thanks to the EU, this might be the case. It seems like from 2024 anyway, Apple will be forced to use the USB connector unless they go completely portless. So I think Apple will stick to the lightning connector for the iPhone 15s, but for the iPhone 16s, we may see USB-C. Now let's talk about the build and design. So the iPhone 14 Pro Max looks a lot like the iPhone 13 Pro Max, which looked a lot like the iPhone 12 Pro Max. So yeah, the design is practically the same. We do have a larger camera module, and we've got this deep purple color, which I actually do really like. Now, I wasn't expecting a design change, to be fair, so I'm sure most people will be happy with this. You've got the stainless steel frame. It is quite durable. We've got ceramic shield at the front, and we do have IP68 water and dust resistance. Now, one thing that a lot of people ask me after using a device for a couple of months is how has it fared in your day-to-day? Do you have any scratches or scuffs on it? And my iPhone is in pretty much pristine condition, but one of the reasons for that is I always keep a case on my phones purely because I don't want to risk damaging something that's so expensive. And as durable as the new iPhones are, they are not indestructible. So if you do want to protect your investment like me, then you might want to consider a case from our video sponsor, Rhino Shield. Rhino Shield cases exceed military grade protection, use food grade plastics that are BPA free, and they're available in a variety of different colors. There's also 5 new colors: cobalt blue, ash gray, antique bronze, violet, and the sage green. You've got a range of customization with hundreds of prints and options to design your own case. You can even change the button colors or change your camera ring for even more customization. And Rhino Shield have accessories for lots of different devices, so if you haven't picked up a new iPhone, that's fine. You can refresh your current smartphone with a new case from Rhino Shield. Now, if you do want to pick up a case from Rhino Shield, there's going to be a link in the description below. And using the exclusive code SuperSaf, you can get 20% off. However, that 20% off is only going to be available for the first week. After that, it will be 10%, so you're going to have to hurry. Now let's move on to the cameras. So what I want to say straight away is, in my opinion, the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max have the best overall cameras on any smartphone out right now. Yes, other smartphones might be better in particular areas, but when we're looking at an all-round camera package for the versatility, for video, photos, all of that combined, the iPhone is still the one to beat. I've taken hundreds of images on my iPhone 14 Pro Max over the past couple of months, and I've been very impressed. Now, we do have a resolution bump for the first time in many years on an iPhone, 48 megapixels, but you will still be shooting at 12 megapixels with pixel binning. And I think the best thing about having that larger size sensor is that shutter lag is pretty much non-existent. And this is something that especially Samsung devices suffer with. If you're trying to take pictures of your kids who are running about or your pets who never stay still, then you will get that shutter lag. With the iPhone, it's probably the best smartphone to use to avoid that shutter lag. And also, when you're taking pictures in low light, it's not going to take as long to capture those low light images like it traditionally would have done because of that large size sensor. Images across the ultrawide and the telephoto camera are really consistent. 3x optical zoom. I really like the iPhone for portraits. I still think this is the best overall smartphone camera for portraits. We also now have foreground blur, which makes portraits look even more realistic. And we have portraits at 2x now as well, which look really good because it's cropping in on the main sensor. Yeah, cameras are amazing on this. For video as well, we've got excellent dynamic range. Still the best video on any smartphone out right now. I was a little skeptical of cinematic mode when it released last year on the 13 Pro Max, but now we've got it here in 4K. And I actually find myself using it quite a bit because it is so good and it's miles ahead of the competition. We also have action mode right now, which is very usable, 2.8K, so it's a high resolution and it does do a really good job in terms of stabilizing your footage. If you do want to see how the iPhone fares compared to other devices, I have done some SuperSaf style camera comparisons. I'll link those down in the description. But yeah, let me just emphasize again, if you're looking for the best all-round camera package, then the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max are the ones to go for. Now let's talk about the performance. So the iPhone 14 Pro Max does come with the latest A16 Bionic chip. And in my experience, it's not been too different to the A15 Bionic because the A15 Bionic was already really fast. Yes, you may notice a difference in benchmarks, but when you're using this on the day-to-day, it goes through everything absolutely fine. And I don't think you're gonna have any issues with this. And it's also gonna last you a good while. Having said that, the issue I have with the iPhone, which I've had for many years now, is when it comes to multitasking and apps being paused in the background. Now, Apple's quite aggressive when it comes to apps in the background. It pauses them completely. And yes, that does help with battery life, but then it can be frustrating in certain situations. The situation that I've been talking about for many years is on Instagram, for example. If I am trying to upload a story, then I move on and do something else on another app, that story will not continue uploading in the background. I will have to physically go in back into Instagram, back onto my stories and wait for it to finish uploading. Then I can carry on. This should really not be the case for a flagship device in 2022. This does not happen with Android smartphones. Now, yes, I know Apple is probably trying to find a balance between saving battery life and having those background processes continue. but there's got to be a better way to do this balance in my opinion. Now, some of this may also be down to the software. So we do have iOS 16. I personally really like iOS 16. I think it's come such a long way. And features like being able to isolate the background just by tapping on it, it is so cool. Somebody that has been using Photoshop for the past 15 years and spent countless hours and days just keying something out from the background. Now you can simply do this with a tap. I mean, it's just so impressive how it can do this. And just things like having your image overlap the clock on your lock screen. Which other smartphone apart from an iPhone can you do this on easily? It's so cool. Having said that, I still think that there are improvements that we need to iOS. Just for example, on here on the home screen, we still have 4 columns, which are the same as we have on the iPhone mini. I mean, the iPhone 14 Pro Max has a massive display. Why can't we have 5 columns? I know Apple likes to keep things consistent, but I do think this can be utilized better with such a large display. But anyway, moving on, Face ID works great as expected, even though we now have it in a more compact area. And one of the things that I've been talking about when it comes to Face ID over the past couple of years is whenever we do have to wear masks, it was quite annoying. And yes, you could unlock your smartphone with your Apple Watch. But now Face ID does work even if you do have a mask on by just recognizing the area around your eyes. And it's something that's super convenient. Although now we pretty much don't have to wear masks. But it's nice that Apple has considered this. Maybe it's a little bit late, but anyway. And the speakers, we've got stereo speakers once again, one in the earpiece, one bottom firing. They sound absolutely great, some of the best sounding speakers on any smartphone. Now, there are some bonus features on the iPhone thanks to some new sensors that we have. Features which I've personally not been able to test, and I hope I never have to test. So we do have crash detection. If you are involved in an accident, the iPhone will be able to detect that you've been in a crash and contact emergency services on your behalf if you don't respond. What is quite funny, however, is that I've been reading reports that lots of people's iPhones have been triggering in theme parks because I guess roller coasters do give off the triggers that car crashes do. So I'm not sure what Apple's going to do about this, but hey. And the other new feature is the emergency SOS via satellite. So if you are in the middle of nowhere, you're lost, you don't have any signal, then the iPhones will be able to use satellites to guide you and contact emergency services. This is going to be available initially in the US and in Canada in November, so this month. I have no idea when it's going to be coming to the UK, and Apple hasn't really been clear about when this is going to be coming to other regions. The other thing a lot of people have been talking about is the lack of a physical SIM card tray in the US. Now, what's funny is when I posted my unboxing, a lot of people were saying, why do you have a SIM card tool when you don't have a SIM card tray on your iPhone? This must be a fake iPhone. It's so annoying when people don't have a clue and think they're very smart. The lack of SIM card tray is specific to the US only. If you are outside the US, like here in the UK, you will still have the physical SIM card tray. In terms of my thoughts about it, I'm somebody who travels a lot, and there are situations sometimes when I'm away and I need to just pop in a local SIM card to use data. And that's a process that I have no idea how I would replicate with eSIMs. So it is something that's specific to the US right now. I personally think it is still quite premature. I think Apple should have probably waited before going full on eSIM in the US. But if you're outside the US, then that's not a problem that you're gonna have. However, if you're outside the US, a problem you will have is with pricing. Did you like how smooth that transition was? Anyway, so when it comes to pricing, the iPhone 14 Pro Max is the same price as the 13 Pro Max launched at in the US. However, if you are in other regions, you likely will have to pay more compared to what you may have paid for the iPhone 13 Pro Max. In particular, here in the UK, the 1TB model is around £200 more. Now, I know that's not necessarily Apple's fault because it's just the current economic situation, in particular in the UK, where the current government is drilling the great British pound right into the ground. But anyway, I'm not gonna go into a rant here. Regardless, that does mean that if you are in the UK, you will be paying quite a bit for the iPhone 14 Pro Max. I can already see my Indian friends and friends from South America and other regions complaining, saying, ha, you know how we feel now when we have to pay so much more for our iPhones. But having said that, if you are after the best iPhone money can buy, then the iPhone 14 Pro Max is the one. I personally really enjoy it. Yes, it's not perfect, nothing is. There is room for improvement. However, this is easily one of my favorite smartphones of 2022. That's what I think anyway. What do you guys think? Do drop me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you do want to see what the cameras of the iPhone 14 Pro Max are like compared to the competition, I have compared it to the S22 Ultra as well as the Google Pixel 7 Pro SuperSaf style. I'll link those videos here in the cards. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, then do smash that like button for me. If you haven't already, then be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon. There's lots more content coming up here on the channel. Don't forget, if you do want to get a case for your iPhone, then you can get 20% off using my code on Rhino Shield. Details will be down in the description below. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on SuperSaf TV, and I'll see you next time.